Hey everybody, today we are having a look at Ezekiel chapters 10 to 12. Now, if you have already read through our Bible reading for today, you might come to the quick conclusion how difficult this book is. Isaiah and Jeremiah, which we've already spent time in, also have their own sets of difficulties, but Ezekiel is completely a whole nother category, I think. It is very complex, very strange, and yet it is an incredible book to study. With that said, let's try to dig deep into what is going on in these three chapters. So chapter 10 starts with a continuation of the previous chapters, where we have essentially God's chariot. There's this kind of platform with a throne on top of it, and on the corner of each of these platforms is these beings called cherubim. Cherubim basically means the guardian ones. That's what it means in Hebrew. And in the Hebrew Bible, in the Old Testament, it's usually an indication of these really powerful, divine, and strange supernatural beings. We might think of them as some kind of version of angels, but to Ezekiel and to the people who sort of have these visions of these cherubim, they are kind of beyond description. That they have different faces of a human, but different animals. They have various wings, and they're covered with eyes. And if you actually were to draw an image of these creatures, it would look very, very strange. But again, I think these are creatures that are sort of beyond description, but also how they're described is very symbolic. So the eyes covering their body means that they can see in every direction. They know what's going on. The wings, and they also are described here with wheels, movable wheels, which indicates that they are able to move in every direction, which we'll get to in a moment. And the fact that they have human faces and animal faces indicates that, they have all these characteristics that those same sort of creatures share. So strength or cunning or intelligence or whatever it may be, that these are highly divine and complex creatures. And so chapter 10 starts with this platform with God's throne on it, these cherubim with these wheels on the corners. And basically what is happening is this God's throne is moving out of the temple. And it goes out of the temple, and from the center of the temple, out to the outer court of the temple, out even further to the Mount of Olives, and then eventually it leaves the city. And what is this about? Well, it's this symbolic sort of picture of God abandoning his people. The people back then believed that their God's presence, including Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, presence resided in the city, in the temple in particular. And so God, as an act of judgment against these people, who the text describes are just idolatrous, they're killing one another, they're stealing from one another, they're just making bad decisions all around. God is leaving and abandoning his people. This is the story of the anti-Exodus. Instead of God leading his people out of slavery, he's abandoning his people to death and destruction. And the interesting thing is, where does this throne and these cherubim in God's spirit end up? In Babylon. And so God leaves and abandons his people in Jerusalem as an act of judgment for their wickedness and idolatry. And he moves to Babylon. Why? Well, in the text, it tells us that these leaders who are left in Jerusalem said, we're really the ones who are privileged. We're like meat in the cooking pot, which is not a great image. Like, obviously, the cooking pot means there's a fire around you, right? But you're somewhat protected. You're in the pot. But everyone else, they've been thrown out to the fire, right? Out of the frying pan into the fire, if you've heard that phrase, kind of applies to this passage right now, that they say, yeah, we're being pressured on all these sides, but at least we're still the meats, we're the choice, we're the best parts in the pan still, and all the fats and all the unwanted stuff, that's been thrown out to the fire, taken to Babylon. And by God's chariots, his throne, moving to Babylon, it's this act of judgment to say, actually, you are the ones that are the unwanted ones. And I'm going to be and dwell with my people in Babylon. And this idea of God on the move is a really incredible scene, because nobody thought in those terms back in those days, that they thought God resided in one city, in one temple, and that was it. And if that city and temple got destroyed, well, that God had been defeated. But here, God's like, I'm more powerful than that. I can't be defeated. And in fact, I'm not just central to this one place, but I'm everywhere. And especially with my people who have been taken into exile, I'm with them in their suffering. So this great picture of God condemning those who want to disobey him, and dwelling in a foreign land in slavery with those people who are downtrodden. It's a really cool picture that's what our God is like. And then the end of this section, chapter 12, begins with these people again mocking God, saying, look, we've heard all these visions before about what God's going to do, and that's going to happen in the distant future, if it happens at all. These things are not going to come to pass. And it ends with this really poignant point where God says, yeah, you think it's going to be next week or next month or next year when all these prophecies are coming to pass, but guess what? It's happening tomorrow, essentially. It's going to happen. And what do we know within the history of this, of what's going on? That's exactly what happens. The Babylonians come in and they take a remnant back, and then there's this period of unrest for some time, but Jerusalem still exists, people still live there, but eventually, very quickly, the Babylonians come back in and they take away God's people or destroy them once and for all. And the Bible says this is God's act of judgment for those who are rebellious. Yet, again, there's always this glimmer of hope that he is with those who remain faithful. And that's not the end of the story. But he says in chapter 11 that I will give you a new heart, a heart of flesh. I'm going to transform your heart of stone and make it fleshly again. This promise that even though we have rejected God and turned away from him and rebelled, he still won't give up on us. It's an amazing promise. So that's Ezekiel chapters 10 to 12. Hope that was encouraging and challenging, and we'll see you next time. Bye.